Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Series with me, Kim Britt, proudly powered by leadershipbydesign.co, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me in today's marketing and leadership segment, marketing and communications expert and co-host, Craig Pagely. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm good, Kevin. Thank you. Yeah, good to be chatting again. And I must admit, I'm really enjoying this incredible frosty, fresh weather that we're experiencing. A good rain. We really need the rain. We've had a bit of a lack of rain in our rainy season. So just as we hit winter, hopefully we'll catch up on a bit of that. But the one good thing about Johannesburg winters is that the days are clear, they're fresh and crisp and invigorating. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
No, I was like, because I know from a lot of conversations, you like the cold weather.
I just like to, this is best time for a cabriolet vehicle as well, particularly in the Johannesburg winter days. It's beautiful, clear blue sky. It is crisp and chilly. But then the days, you can get days that go up to 18, 19 degrees as well. So you get a big, from a sort of 2-3 degree to 18, 19, big temperature variation. But it's just that invigoration of that crisp air for me is just one of my best things.
Yeah, well, and I've just moved. That's why we still have an echo. So, but we just got I just got a fireplace in the new house. So I'm happy. I'm fine with the cold. I'm like, bring on the cold. I'm gonna sit by the fireplace, red wine and fireplace.
Yeah, that's a perfect combination.
Craig, as we start today's show, I wanted to remind our listeners to check out last week's conversation around return to work mandates and to check out the doom loop versus boom loop principles. There's some interesting insights there.
Kevin, yes, I really appreciated some of those takeaways. Some good points in the article, but as you referenced, the simplicity of this sort of doom loop versus boom loop is something that really stood out for me. And what we noted from this particular approach in the article is that if employees have been working from home effectively, when you force them back into office routine, it really can create this doom loop, which is preeminent front end of it is lack of trust and lower performance. And if you focus instead on the outcomes and give them a workplace flexibility opportunity, you will definitely inspire the boom loop in engagement. And the key note there is that if people who feel trusted generally produce twice as much than those that don't in the workplace environment. And isn't that the kind of culture that you want to instill and enable in an organization?
Absolutely, Greg. And it's strange that what I find strange about the conversation is that so many people still don't understand that the importance of cultivating trust within an environment. It's the psychological safety aspect of it, right? And the people kind of these big, like the quiet quitting like scenario that happened. There's this doom loop that's prevalent. You kind of go, these big moments of human behaviors happening, but that so easily can be shifted and adjusted purely based on one simple thing by cultivating trust. I mean, like if you hear it in that context, it's quite frightening that there could be such a big movement in your environment based on one element that you don't cultivate as a foundation in your environment. And it's interesting to hear it from that aspect.
And Kevin, when you apply the principle of performance twice as much, it's a no-brainer. You would want to, as a leader, surely inculcate that kind of trusting culture in your organization. And there are all the other layers that we spoke about behind it, but really great proposition.
Guys, so if you want to go check that out, every Thursday, Craig and I have these conversations. And 1 month we really focus on marketing, and 1 month on leadership. Craig, so in today's discussion, what are we going to be talking about?
Kevin, a really great, intriguing, and important conversation is that the conversation of thinking creatively, and something that I wholly believe in, and in many instances, I genuinely believe that it's a principle that is really compromised across many organizations. It is principally because of, I think, tying back into the conversation opener we've just had, when you've got a trusting environment, there's more flexibility and freedom to stimulate and bring on the opportunity for open thinking. But when you're in a non-trusting environment and you're setting a set of very rigid principles and rules over people, they lose that ability to have their flexibility and free time thinking. So I think a nice segue into this, and the reality is we all want to be able to take a step back, clear our desks, clear our minds, and have the chance to think freely. So for the conversation, I want to reference the book by Dan Pontefract. He's the author of the book, and the book is titled Open to Think, Slow Down, Think Creatively, and Make Better Decisions.
Great, and I'm so glad that we are having this conversation because, I just got a reminder on LinkedIn about celebrating my 3rd year with MIT Sloan's Neuroscience for Business program as one of the assessors. And Dr. Tara Swart, when you listen to some of the neuroscience behind what she breaks down into simplicity, and it's very simplistically broken down into behaviors. And one of the things that, she does discuss very often is tapping into intuition, right? And we're currently as leaders, there's various areas of, the mind-body connection, your intuition, your brain, gut, and heart connection. There's various areas that she actually speaks about. But one of the things, and she does this on, there's so many Google or YouTube videos that she actually has on this conversation around really taking the time to stop exactly this, to stop, slow down, and readjust your thinking, or go oxygenate your brain so that you have enough time for your brain to catch up with, your decision-making processes. And, from a neuroscience perspective, your brain doesn't attach the same thought processing in a certain emotional capacity than it does in a different one. So when you really stop and change your state of being, the way that you think and what you're about to think also changes. So when you know that as a really useful tactic to thoughtful leadership, it changes your outcome immediately. So I'm excited to unpack this conversation.
Kevin, the reality is it is such a hot topic, and again, if we plug it into the conversation a week ago, the work from home remote versus being forced back into the office is just about, it would be interesting to see what percentage of open thinking happens spontaneously and unencumbered in the work from home versus a trusting organization as well. Because if you are in the confines of an office environment, but you're in that trusting organization, you're provided with a platform to be able to think openly and freely. It'd be interesting to get to understand that correlation, because when the right environment is provided at work, there might again be support of the return to office policies and things like that. But that would be an interesting evaluation for us. But what's interesting here in the book is that Dan Pontefract in the book offers a strategy for thinking more clearly and making better decisions, and he explains how his dream, decide, do principle and system works, and he provides some real life examples of what he terms open thinkers, and these are folk whose accomplishments are actually emanate from their deliberative cognitive practices, and I know this is something that resonates with you in the teachings that you do as well. And what he notes is that people tend to rush to conclusions, they accept misinformation, and in the instantaneousness of fake news today, that just is becoming higher and higher a norm, accepting misinformation. They skip nuances and they trust very shallow assumptions, Kevin. And all of these are because we don't actually take a pause to step back, lean back, and think and ponder around the notion of that information action. So the effectiveness of your thought process depends on how well you sort out your evidences, how well you reflect upon them, and how well you challenge your conclusions. And I really like those three principles that he talks about here, Kevin.
Craig, I think that, what's important to note as well is making better decisions is because we are driven by our, you can go into the technicality of your amygdala, within seconds, your amygdala is making a decision kind of to fight, flight, fear, fawn, all of those triggered responses. But when you really take the time and this as a tactic, right, and you have to make a really important decision, part of your brain doesn't necessarily activate or find the information purely based on the fact that your amygdala is its reason to be there is to keep you safe, right?
Yes, sure.
So the moment you're making any kind of fast reacting decisions, you have to have the cognizance and the awareness of self to kind of go, give me a second, let me check on this. Let me find a way to mitigate my immediate responses based on the fact that my biases, my values, beliefs, my experience, my memories, decision-making processes, all of that is going to impact in a split second the decision I'm about to make.
Yes.
All of that as a holistic approach to how you show up as a leader may not be the most effective way because you haven't actually taken the time to slow down and think through what it is you're about to make the decision on.
Yes.
And that's what people don't realize is, and we have biases, we have blind spots, right? So
yes.
If you don't actively kind of go, okay, I get this is the information I've got available to me right now. Let me go away with this information and come back to you in a day or an hour or next week so that you have the time to check the blind spots and get, a different version of a story out of
yes.
Yes.
And I love what you're saying because it's a perfect segue into the opening concept of the book, which is about pause to reflect. And I'll read the first two paragraphs here. It's a case of today we know people are busier than ever, and obviously they have little time to do anything well, including, take note, the vital process of thinking things through. And so for many people, clear thinking is increasingly rare, and people don't always get around to the necessary steps of thoughtfully weighing in and presenting their options, building expertise, and reaching their own reasoned, and I like this word, reasoned conclusions to solve problems and make decisions. Sometimes outsource their creativity and critical thinking to the likes of, and I know you're like this, Alexa, Siri, or Wikipedia. So it's taking the originality away there as well. So closed thinkers are unwilling to open their minds to new ideas. They seem to think it's more convenient to go through life shut off from new information and ideas. And this is the point that I referenced earlier. Too many organizations also function in this closed-minded way. And it is a real problem, Kevin. And he quotes in the book, he says, when we think we are using our mind to actively form or connect an idea, thinking is also an approach, a possibility, a deliberation, an opinion, or an attitude. It can even be a belief or a conclusion.
Yeah. And that's, Craig, I just want to add to that because when it says it could be a belief, it can even be a belief or a conclusion. One of the things when you do the Leader as Coach program, we look at, what are the beliefs that you have about your brand? What are the beliefs that you have about you as a leader, right? And we just randomly pick in the room. It's like, okay, so what do you believe about leadership? What do you believe about yourself, right? And I mean, it's not by coincidence that it's called a limiting belief.
Yeah.
It's a limiting belief that you're actually using this information and you're throwing information through and filtering it through that limiting belief. And you're kind of going, no wonder you're making a decision that is not clear and thought through because, the frame that you're using it in is quite limiting.
Yes. So the next paragraph's got one or two key words that really resonate for me again here as well. And here he talks about many people in companies needing to adopt a new thought process to build their decision-making skills and agility. And this improved system of thought or open thinking is definitely a holistic approach of reflection, decision making, and actions to take note, secure and ethical outcome. And that really stood out for me, because in many instances, whilst organizations are trying to apply some principles to resonate with their staff and outputs and things like that, the ethics aspect still is not in place. And then that talks back to another principle that we've spoken about in the values of the organization aligning with the values of the employees, and ethics really plays a key part in that regard. But open thinking really calls for this set of careful consideration and for taking actions through a process of the 3Ds, the dreaming, the deciding, and the doing. And with open thinking, you definitely work through all of your issues. You're able to weigh in the evidences and then decide how to resolve it and take the necessary action. So it's a rational construct to get to a point of being able to deliver that action. And it's an iterative, inclusive, contemplative, and interrogative process, Kevin. But most importantly, as you mentioned earlier, it's actually deliberative, and it's not a spur of the moment or automatic kind of process or action.
So, Craig, my question is, how much daydreaming do you do?
Yeah, so you beat me to that question. Gosh.
Well, I'll tell you why. While you think about it, is because when I was younger, a belief that that I got from the way that you're supposed to be in the world. A family member always said to me, you always got your head in the clouds. You're always daydreaming about things, and none of that's going to solve any problems. And it became an issue that I as an individual, compared to my family member, I love daydreaming, right? But what I know now today, doing the stuff that I do, is daydreaming allows you to disconnect and allows you to alleviate from the formulaic kind of identity that you've created for this moment right now. It taps into an environment of information and space that you don't even recognize that your brain's reality can even tap into. So knowing what I now know, I make time for daydreaming. And there's, when I've had a difficult day, today I've had a really difficult day, and needing to think through stuff. Like at 10 o'clock this morning, after a very upsetting conversation, I stopped, I put some time in my diary, and I went for a walk, and I just daydreamed for an hour. And I was just thinking it through, mulling it over, and kind of going, what does this mean? How do I tackle this? What's my next approach here? And when you really lean into the importance of what daydreaming does do for you, it really, because there's another thing around, and science will show us that we chunk information, right? So we chunk information in big chunks, or we chunk it into specificity. So, and when you're allowed to chunk into big chunks, right, your brain really starts reaching for the purpose of why. What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose? Right? When you go to specificity, you're looking at lots of detail, right? But when you're reaching between those two and you allow for the daydreaming to occur, you're actually activating far more bits per second in your brain than when you're actually just sitting there in the frustration and trying to come up with a solution, because your emotions will drive a negative connection to the thought and your behavior, right? So that whole thing has to happen.
So for me, daydreaming or seeking clarity, whatever the movement is between those two sort of constructs, at the moment, I genuinely feel I'm not getting enough time, therefore not spending enough time in being able to have free thinking. I definitely come from a premise and behavior of the understanding the importance of being able to just take a step back, sit down, contemplate, go back through the day's activities, revisit some of the actions and reactions, and use that to hone in on that. But the one thing that I do on the weekend, when I don't need to be in an office or with project teams, is I do spend a good deal amount of quiet time wherever I can. And for me, yeah, I'm doing quite a bit of cycling training at the moment. But when I've done all of my training, I go to the sauna in the gym.
Yeah.
And it just is this incredible escapism place for me. It really is. It's good for your body after having done exercise. It just helps open and loosen the muscles again as well. So it's really great from that point of view. It's really good from a cardio point of view, which is important for the body. And it's a moment to just, you close your eyes and you just have a chance to filter, to let things go, and that the mechanism of sweat as well is you feeling toxins leave your body and things like that. So for me, that's my free thinking space. Sometimes there's less free thinking there because there's actually a full sauna of incredible minds, and people just get into some incredible conversations, from religious to politics to just good sport understanding. But I try and put aside time on a Saturday and time on a Sunday to have that disengagement, disconnect time. Definitely do. And yourself?
I just want to note one thing as well around journaling, Craig. This is why when people say journaling and you're like, oh, well, I don't want to journal. I don't want a gratitude journal. Like they always think of it as like a very naff way to kind of tap into something, right? But, there's science to support that when you are putting pen to paper and you are taking the time to sit and write out your information, whatever you're writing, right? What that does do is it allows your brain to really settle down. It allows your nervous system to settle down. And as you're doing that, taking the time to actually write something out, and you're using a journal to actually do that, it really taps into that whole dreaming aspect of what your brain's wanting you to reach for. And because you allow for that moment to exist, you're tapping into a different neurosynapses and your neuro connection.
So I love the point you make about journaling. So whilst I don't journal from a point of diary keeping in terms of historical collecting thoughts in a historical way, I have a series of these little what this would be an A4, A3, A4, A2. It's the other way around. A5, A6 is an A6. Little moleskin, and I must have 20 of these lying around where I go into those quiet moments. If I'm not doing sports and I want my quiet moment, I will always have my little moleskin with me with a pen, and I just note concepts and thinking and reordering things and the likes in there. So it's a practice that I do have, and I often I think maybe it's from my career as an architect, and I feel that I'm more creative. I can't just jump onto a laptop and start my thinking. I need to note something down. I need to pick up a pen or pencil to paper and get that connection for my creativity to flow. So writing in these books is definitely one of those stimulus points for me. Absolutely is. But you just going back to that point and asking, how much time do I put into reflection? It's a lovely reference to reflection and action, and open thinking balances reflection and action. But the key point to note here, though, Kevin, is if these elements don't align, there are generally three bad habits that will come to bear in this regard. And the first one here is about defaulting to indifferent thinking, and habit traps us into staying with the current methods and thought processes, no matter how self-defeating those are. The second trap here is, so that's indifferent thinking. Then there's indecisive thinking, which is equally detrimental. And those who have a hard time making decisions are constantly muddling over what to do or not to do. So there's an inert inaction in place there. And they fall prey to this endless dreaming, which is a state of mind that strategic management expert H. Igor Ansoff calls paralysis by analysis, which we all know too well. And then the third bad habit here is inflexible thinking. And here, we know many people are uncomfortable with consciously thinking about what they believe the actions are and need to be, and they try avoid analyzing their own processes and just dive straight in and forge forward. And what happened here is they actually choose activity over this weighted blend of ideation, pause, consideration, and response, and they therefore act on doing, and that becomes their most important driver, Kevin.
Craig, I want to give the audience like a beautiful, we call it the Cartesian quadrant in NLP. It is like a Cartesian quadrant, but the NLP one, and you can Google it. When you're having this indifferent kind of thinking, indecisive or inflexible, situation with clients, just from a unpacking of your brain, one of the quadrant really, what the questions that they ask is, what will happen if you did do it? The second one is, what will happen if you didn't do it? And then the third one is, what will not happen if you did, and what will not happen if you didn't?
Oh, love that.
So when you look at it from that aspect, you really start like it's sort of it unpacks your brain to a compound effect, and you kind of go, okay, cool. It really does start unlatching your those beliefs, or that indifferent thinking, or because it's habit formed way of processing information, just by using the Cartesian quadrant.
Quadrant, I'm writing that down. I said effect, sorry, quadrant. I want to go and check that out.
Yeah, it's just a very useful 4 questions to kind of really get more out of your head than sitting in the stuckness. And that analysis, paralysis by analysis, is usually a good moment where you can use this, because it really just unleashes your brain just a little bit more. And that's what your brain needs. Your brain just needs to see it in a different frame, and when you're in the different frame, it sees it from a different perspective, and that's why it's so useful.
And when you see it from a different perspective, you're more open to receiving new ideas and information from a broader range of sources. And when you have that ability to take that in, you're definitely starting to be more engaging and prone to innovative concepts. So open thinkers definitely move beyond what they know, which is really great, and they acknowledge, exactly to your point, what they don't know and what they're willing to learn. And that's a perfect plug-in into the Cartesian quadrant.
Craig,
So,
just for just for the audience's sort of reference to this, those are the moments when you go, oh yeah, I didn't think of it like that. That's usually the phrase that follows straight after, when you've unpacked your brain to that degree. They usually go, oh, I never saw it like that before. That is the response. When you're getting that response, you're realizing, oh, okay, cool. They've shifted gears, they've shifted frame, and they're actually seeing it from a whole different knowledgeable space. And then you can go from there.
So to add on into those sort of 4 questions that you asked there are 3 other questions that come out in the next paragraph, and it just notes that to determine if you should actually incorporate this open thinking concept into your way of handling information and conducting analysis and making decisions, you need to ask yourself 3 further questions about how you think and the way you think. And then the first question is, do you devote sufficient time to reflecting and dreaming? And you asked me that particular question. Yeah. The second question is, do you rely on verifiable data to make decisions? And I think that talks a bit to the rigidity of your decision-making process. And then the last question is actually, do you take time required to do things properly? And if not, you definitely not going to align with the principle of open thinking. But the entire concept of open thinking has 3 core elements, Kevin. The first is creative thinking, the second is critical thinking, and then the third is applied thinking. And I really would love to pick on your mind around these as we go through them, because you deliver and preach these principles daily in your practice of leadership coaching and team coaching. So the first thing about creative thinking is creative thinking covers ideation and reflection, 2 very, very important points. And when you get the balance at play, that obviously leads to better ideas. Mythologist Joseph Campbell became famous for his detailed, insightful discussions of cultural archetypes. And his most notable example is that of the hero. And it's quite interesting, doing a lot of employer branding work and repositioning of employer brands. The Campbell's framework is just so key to the analysis that we do with organizations to get to understand where they fit in the spectrum. And hero definitely is one that comes across quite often. And you know, there's a combination of archetypes that do work together. But very interesting to see how many of the organizations actually note themselves as heroes. And the article actually talks about the inspiration for Luke Skywalker's character in the Star Wars film franchise comes out of the hero archetype. And Campbell gave himself time to reflect deeply, dropping out of grad school to travel and think before producing the classics, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And what is noted here is thinking, like eating, is something we all do. In fact, we are all constantly thinking, but as with eating, there are both healthy and unhealthy habits. And I love that reference. So Kevin, thinkers are willing to wonder and take their time as they need to think things through. And taking time to think means making time for this daydreaming. You asked the point earlier again about how much time I give to daydreaming. And daydreaming is absolutely, we know this, an essential component of being creative. So when you dream, you actually have to stop and observe when you daydream, because at night you're not necessarily stopping and observing. You spend time thinking. Daydreaming helps you figure out new solutions and processes. And for aspiring or practicing open thinkers who want to pause and reflect, the article says that time becomes the most valuable commodity. So when you hear the concept of time starved or time poor, that's definitely not in relation to critical daydreaming thinking folk. Those are guys who are starving themselves from that. So don't exploit your time, as most organizations want you to do. Rather, explore it. Set up a quality time management system to protect your time. You, as you noted, put it in your diary and you use that as a reference point, and you go and act and action that time. Don't overcommit yourself, though, at the same time. Free up your days as much as possible, and where you can, farm out some of the basic menial tasks of your job or of your life needs, and move your focus from the minute to much bigger picture thinking. And that's the bit that I really enjoy, because open the horizon of your thinking, and the creative stimulus just pours in. I experienced that firsthand.
Craig, you know, what I want to say about creative thinking is, and it ties to creative and critical thinking, is, you know, from an NLP perspective, I use that reference because, you know, I've done a lot of research on it, and, you know, I have that as my sort of my backbone to understand why humans do what they do. And what we understand with what your brain is actively doing is it's generalizing, distorting, and deleting information in real time and focusing according to your own filter system, focusing to only a plus minus 2,000 bits per second, right? That we consciously are focused on. What we don't realize and we don't recognize is actively your brain is distorting, generalizing, and deleting about 4.2 billion bits per second.
Sure. You know,
it takes all of that, because right now you're not listening to the birds chirping out or the car driving down the road. You're not listening to all of that. That information is being deleted. Consciously, you're going, I'm busy with this focused conversation with Craig now. I'm not listening to the birds chirp. I'm also not telling my heart to beat because I forgot to tell it to beat. I'm not forgetting about the blinking that my eyes are doing because my eyeball's going to dry out. I'm focused on about the 2,000 bits that I'm busy with right now. And when you start recognizing that your brain's actually taking instruction from you, what does that mean when you are making the time to creatively think about stuff? When you are not limited by the reality of the situation, and rather, what if we created a what if scenario? What if we could do this? I'm sure the Wright brothers didn't, sit there and go, oh, well, we're just never going to fly. They lived in the dreaming of what if it was possible. And today we fly, right?
Yep.
If it wasn't for the Wright brothers creatively thinking about what potentially could happen, it would never have happened, right? So you have to actively, and for leaders or business owners or people listening out there, lean into the 4.2 billion bits per second that you're not aware of, that you might be deleting, distorting, and generalizing on, and kind of go, what if I focused over here and paid attention to it for 5 minutes and played with it, right? And just let it be something creative, something that I didn't necessarily give any meaning, but played with it so that I maybe figured out what I was learning from it. And when you come with curiosity, you can't judge it. So then
Yes.
it becomes a beautiful
Yes.
moment of clarity that you kind of just having for yourself. And who knows what could come from that. But until you are intentional about the creative thinking, it's never going to happen.
Absolutely. And just, going back to one of your opening statements about the undoing, the whole concept of unthinking, unlearning, rethinking, relearning, really, I can see the total plug into here. So again, we mentioned that open thinking has got these 3 core elements. The first, the creative thinking. The second core element is critical thinking. And critical thinking centers around analysis and judgment, and it definitely enables much better decision making, Kevin. We all have cognitive biases, something that we talk about often on the show, and these often get in the way, in fact always get in the way of clear logical thinking. And it's really important to understand and learn about your biases and then compensate for them to bring you to a point of having sound judgment. So challenge your thinking in the conclusions you reach, seek new ideas and information, and definitely be open to welcoming opposing or non-conforming opinions. And he makes a wonderful statement here. Better thinking is hard, not easy. Better thinking takes time, not haste. There is no shortcut, and therefore you can't be time-starved. You need to be in a position and environment that allows you the tenure and duration to be able to produce this critical thinking piece. And for organizations and staff in businesses, it's about collaborating with colleagues. This definitely in workshop environments, being open to engagement, definitely helps promote open thinking. And the trust word comes out here again, asking people you trust and respect for their suggestions and advice, Kevin. And the more people you involve in your decision making, it's obvious that the better your decisions are going to be, obviously within limits. So as you think through these new approaches and concepts, you need to realize that failure isn't negative for people or organizations if your company evaluates your mistakes and values your mistakes and opinions and trusts what you're saying or doing, Kevin. And we know failure can have value as a learning experience as well. And it's important, again, that fail fast forward. You use that as the learning experience, and you stand up, shake yourself off, and shake yourself off, and move on to the next learning opportunity. So make the most of these daily experiences and activities, and really, as a leader, you must be open to your thinking capability, but you need to understand the crucial leadership qualities that go into critical thinking. And again, it talks to a point that we often see that leaders aren't well versed in the principles that they need to be leading with, and what are the leaders' own learning parameters and opportunities, Kevin.
Craig, one of the things that, from a coaching perspective around critical thinking is a very quick way to get you to realize that you're not critically thinking enough around a situation is asking the question, is what you're doing working?
Yeah.
If it's not working, stop doing it.
Yeah. Well,
from that context, you kind of go, maybe I am stuck in my bias. Maybe I'm stuck in the routine way of something that I'm doing. Maybe my approach is just not working, right? And if it's not working, change it. You're not a tree, move. So So it's really getting your brain wrapped around going, okay, cool. This is a version of what I'm telling myself. What is the other potential versions of what I could tap into based on the information that I've got, right? And if it's not working, change it, right?
It reminds me of one of the definitions of insanity, which is doing the same thing time and time again, expecting a different result. Yeah, move.
Very often leaders get to that point where, they can see it's not working, and they go, okay, they throw more money at it, and you're like, okay, well, let's do that, and they see if that's going to work. And if that's not going to work, their voices start raising, and their mood starts changing.
Yes.
Saying, well, clearly, the set of behaviors you're showcasing right now isn't working. So maybe you haven't taken the time to critically think through this process, because the results that you're actually getting are not the results that you want.
Yeah.
Right? You have to have that hat on.
The third core element of open thinking is applied thinking. And the applied thinking means you actually act on your decisions, Kevin. And it's applied thinking actualizes your commitment to execute a decision. So you've got to carry through on it. And it doesn't just focus on what to do, but actually how to do it. And to get the results you want, the how always counts. So important here is you need to set clear goals that everyone in your team can understand. You need to inspire your colleagues to develop their own solutions. You need to support the solutions they suggest and implement them in a process of planned action. And you need to demonstrate your empathy and understanding that the struggles they have are part of finding the solutions, because external conditions will only change constantly. Remain flexible and supportive. And again, a lovely quote here is that our senses are bombarded daily by political propaganda and fake news. We fluctuate between high filtering and gullibility. The truth is becoming harder and harder to discern.
Yeah.
And we know social media is the key culprit to exacerbate that. So yeah, for the listeners, don't assume your applied thinking solutions will always work well or smoothly. We're only human, they won't. Expect that you're going to be tripped up along the way. But in any thoughtful endeavor, we know that life is faced with curveballs and hiccups, and that's just a reality. So avoid letting the organization become a factory of actions. Keeping everyone looking super busy all the time also may generate this veneer of efficiency, but busy work isn't efficient. And as I mentioned last week as well, is beware the busy manager. Sometimes it is just a veneer to hide a whole host of other things. So you want your employees to be thoughtful in their actions, and that can't happen when everybody is flat out. Kevin, the business, the organization, the teams have to be able to slow down, take that step back. And as a leader, it's important to help your employees and colleagues to focus on the long term and not the short term. Because when you're just focusing on short term, you're on the treadmill. You're not on the journey to the end destination.
And Craig, and I'm glad that applied thinking, it requires you to actually commit and execute, because it goes hand in hand with what coaching is all about, right? Coaching is not mentoring. Coaching is not training. Coaching is action and results orientated. So the fact that when you see it like from this context of applied thinking means taking the action to execute. That means you've taken, because I very often sit in coaching sessions and people, you bring up a topic, you bring up a scenario, and then people go, the words they use is, yeah, no, I know. Then I interrupt them and I say, no, you don't know. Don't say you know, because if you knew, you would be actioning it. There's a difference between saying, yes, I know, because I have evidence to prove that I've actually taken action to this. Even if you got good or bad results, it's how you adjust that. But when you say I know and you took no action to that, you don't know. You know about it. You don't know it, right? And there's a very different, and that I think is really significant to applied thinking, because then you know that the thinking that was happening is actually applied. And whether you get good feedback or bad feedback, at least you've got feedback.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the most important points for organizations to understand around those three core elements here is really to ensure that you understand the short term, but you know how and what you need to do today and what that's going to do in terms of impacting your core purpose and the shape of your future. And it's about keeping a close watch on the short term while constantly staying aware of the long term. And in doing so, you can refine the process along your journey. And the importance is, yes, you must accept those mistakes, and the way you respond to those inevitably defines how you do business and how effective you're going to be. But it's important to understand that building an agile, resilient, tolerant culture and avoiding rigid thinking is key for leaders to understand, Kevin.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So some of the essential guides for open thinking here is there are 10 key principles that we can use in an exercise. And the first one here is, principle one is, allow yourself plenty of time to think clearly and comprehensively. Never rush your thinking. Open thinking is a slow thinking environment. Guide number two is, too much thinking, rethinking, and rethinking can become self-defeating. So yeah, you definitely scan. You can have too much collaboration as well. It's important to understand, where to stop asking for input and participation. So after careful thought and conversation, move ahead decisively, take action. But point three is, never take action just to take action. Be thoughtful about what you do and decide what not to do. The fourth point is, be flexible in your thinking. Let knowledge shape your ideas and opinions. And then going back to the good old little, Moleskine books, is write down your best thoughts. Idea flow is a continuing resource, and I really love that. Point six is, be systematic and organized in everything you say and do. Scatterbrains, I love this. Scatterbrains are ineffective thinkers and planners. Point seven is, you can't be creative if you're always busy. Probably the most important point in everything we've said so far. Take breaks to refresh yourself and create time for new ideas to emerge. Point eight is about digging for information to enable proper analysis and helping you make informed decisions. Never be hasty. Don't settle for insufficient data. There's a quote here about Lisa Helps, who's the mayor of Victoria, British Columbia. And Lisa says that thinks people often leap to premature conclusions after reading 3 things on Facebook. And she faces each situation ready to take in meaningful information. We actually had this conversation with the client the other day. You open your social media, you're seeing a Facebook post, and immediately you're reacting on it, as opposed to going, that doesn't impact my life. It doesn't impact my organization. I question the authenticity of it. Move past it. You don't even need to deliver a response to that information. You can move straight past it. Yeah. In fact, it's a nice segue to point 9 here, because it's about maintaining your focus. Don't succumb to time-wasting distractions. And that negative talk, those 3 points on Facebook, definitely could become incredibly time-wasting distractions. And then the 10th point here is, as an open thinker, include time to dream, decide, and do every single day, Kevin.
Craig, listening to them like this is, I don't think people hear this or hear, and I'm making an assumption and a generalization, I'm very aware of that, that this is a skill of discipline. Taking time to think is a skill of discipline, because, just that scatterbrains are ineffective thinkers and planners. Very often people, that's that busyness effect, right? If I'm busy and I'm doing a bit of there, and then I'm running and I'm in and out, and I'm quickly coffee and quickly cigarette and all this stuff, you kind of go, you're actually quite ineffective, right? But when you are disciplined in how you approach the thinking process, that means you take, it's like the first line there, slow thinking movement. It's a slow thinking time that you have to be actively taking the time to slow down and think. And when you apply this with a certain amount of discipline, it becomes an actual skill. And we know that, the future of work tells us, and the Wings concept tells us, creative thinking and critical thinking is an absolute skill that the future of work will need. Right?
Yes.
But for
Yes.
you to actually apply this, it speaks to, do you have enough discipline to sit down and do it? And that's a very fine line for a lot of people.
At 100% correct. And again, these principles that we're talking about the last 2 or 3 weeks are just so easy and effective for leaders to bring into their organizations and do some interactive sessions with their teams to enable this to permeate through the business, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's another really important part that it picks up on, and this is direct impact in terms of the organization. Applied thinking at your organization. So for leaders, again, as you exercise applied thinking, be ruthless about the long term. Yes, you must accomplish things today, but don't get seduced about the apparent success of constant action. And you may, by reflex, want to prioritize immediate actions, and you might stay vigilant about the short term, but always ask what you do today. At least ask how what you do today will affect your core purpose and shape your future. So keep a close watch on that short term while staying aware of the long term, as I mentioned earlier, and just recognize that the information and processing will become obsolete sometimes more rapidly than you can imagine. So let those go as well and work to find the next flow of information, Kevin.
Yeah. In closing today, Craig, so what is the summary that we're going to be chatting about?
I think the 10 key points there, definitely for me, the essential guidelines for open thinking. Plenty of time to think. Too much thinking is not necessarily good for you either. The rethinking definitely can become self-defeating. Don't take action just to take action. Be decisive and thoughtful on it. Be flexible in your thinking. Something possibly some politicians need to understand as well. Write down your best thoughts, because that action definitely is a tap of allowing ideas to flow. Be systematic and organized in everything you say and do. If you can't be creative, you can't be creative if you're always busy. Stop and take time to allow that process, and then just look for information to enable proper decision making, and use that information in the right way. Maintain your focus. Don't get caught in those time-wasting distractions, like you mentioned, Facebook. And then, just include time to dream, daydream. Do this every single day.
I love that. And guys, if you want to go and check out this book, it's Dan Pontefract. Is it Pontefract? Yeah, it's Pontefract.
That's correct. Pontefract, yes.
Open to think, slow down, think creatively, and make better decisions. And Craig, I found a nice quote around thinking, and I think it speaks to one of the points that we did mention, is the trouble with having an open mind, of course, is that people will insist on coming along and trying to put things in it. And so careful who you're spending your time with, right? So
that is fantastic. I really do like, but remember, they may try, but it's you who's going to allow them to put things in it or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that was a really awesome conversation, guys. It's Open to Think is the book's name, and please remember that to go like and share and tune into the Lunchtime Series every Wednesday and Thursday for more from myself and Craig. Have a fantastic week, Craig. Thank you so much. And
absolute pleasure. Thank you, Kevin. Great chat, and see you next week.
Cheers for now. Bye.